All right. So I decided that you're all going to say the class isn't so great, but the flowers are worth it. Now, you'll know it is frozen if there either are no flowers or if they look like Halloween. So we think we're pretty close to the frost here, but this is kind of a bonus. It's a good reason to start early, right? We did 2 weeks earlier than, I think this is the official week of beginning for Molly. Is that right? Pretty much? Who knows, right? This is all that matters. Anyway, glad to have you here, and we're not taking rolls, so if you're here, you're here. We're going to talk about Zelote a bit more today. Last week we had trouble with our sound and all of that, so we think that's working. So I wanted you to hear some great playing and also talk about music in general, but also there are some questions that have been floating around, and so we'll get to those. How many of you were able to hear our wonderful Charlie this weekend? Yeah? Anybody hear him twice? I went both that Saturday night and Sunday, and then I also went to the dress rehearsal, and I went to something else that he did, and he did a great master class Friday morning. Anybody at the master class? A few people at that? Terrific young man. I've known of him since he was like 5, because one of my good friends in Olympia, it was his teacher's best friend, and the teacher's gone, but my friend is still there. So we're going to be in touch about Charlie, and he's living just south of Seattle. That's his home base, and his parents are still in the home in Centralia, Washington, where he grew up. So it's really, he's at home in the Northwest. And this, in fact, was where he became a national finalist in MTNA. MTNA means Music Teachers National Association. And when I was a kid, just to give you a little bit of context, which is a while ago, if we all remember being kids, they invented this competition. And it was such a great idea, and it's still there today, still with us, because there are certain kids that really want to do more than just get 2 pieces ready for the Spring Festival and call it good. And so my dear friend in Spokane, Washington, who's passed now, Margaret Ott, was one of the great teachers in this country. She was herself a Juilliard graduate. Margaret Saunders Ott, some of you may have even heard of her through the years. But she was part of MTNA, Music Teachers National Association. And we talked a little bit about this one day. Our friend Dalton down here in the front has almost all of the Etude magazines, just a few missing issues that he's still searching for, from 1883 until 1957, when they finally transitioned to something else and quit publishing that magazine. Anybody heard of Etude magazine? A few people? They used to, yeah, Dalton. He's reading he's up to year 1903 or something now, reading. And in fact, he's going to look, and we're going to look together for some articles about Rachmaninoff, right? 1883 is right in the heart of all of this. And Etude magazine was published in Pennsylvania. Here's what happened, and this all kind of ties in everything together. In 1876, 100 years after what in the U.S.? Declaration of Independence, this Theodore Presser is the name. He was a publisher and a publisher of music in Bryn Mawr, near Philadelphia, I believe, Pennsylvania. And not maybe unilaterally, but he was a force. And he kind of spearheaded something. He said, you know, we have 100 years of everybody having a piano, but nobody belonging to anything. All the teachers are just teaching whatever they do. We should have an association so piano teachers and voice teachers and violin teachers could get together and learn and share and learn from each other, just like we're doing. And so in 1876, the MTNA was formed. And then the Etude magazine started in 1883. And ever since, and some of you who would have seen these as a kid, maybe you didn't even know what you were looking at, the middle several pages of many of the issues would have a whole bunch of music that you could read through. Anybody remember that? It was great fun. So we had just a few stacks of things on the farm, and I'd read through something, and every now and then you'd find a piece, oh, that's pretty. So that was the magazine. So Rachmaninoff articles are in there, probably Zelote can be found in there. And you met Grace last week, and Grace is on the plane right now to New England, where some family. She and Len are going to visit, I think, some of his kids. So she'll be here next week, and she loved coming last week. And she is the great-granddaughter of Alexander Zloty that we're going to look at today some more and hear some of his playing. I wish I could have known this guy because he just had such an amazing life. I'm going to cycle back to MTNA and bring us up to date here. So when I was a kid, they invented this competition where you had to win your state. That's a pretty big deal. You isn't just playing Friday afternoon for the judge in Missoula and done with it, which is also great. That's enough for a lot of kids. But after a while, you got 7 blue ribbons and 3 gold cups and 10 gold stars, and you say, what else is there? You know, I know I'm not good enough yet. So they invented this competition while I was in high school. And if you won your state, then you could go on and you could win however many states were in your division. And there were 8 states where I grew up in South Dakota. So you had to compete, let's call it, with 8 winners from 8 different states in my case. It took me 3 years of 4 hours a day of practice to win the lowly state of South Dakota. Not that South Dakota's lowly, but there aren't that many people. You know, the pigs weren't playing the piano, so just the people that were left. So it took 3 years to win South Dakota. And then I thought, oh man, that was a long haul. And now I have to compete with, you know, the winners from Minnesota and Kansas and Missouri. And I started thinking, okay, there's Minneapolis, there's St. Louis, there's Denver was in it. And I just thought, you know, I'm the farm boy from South Dakota, not a chance. So I said 4 hours a day for 3 years. So I talked to my brothers and I said, if you guys will feed a little bit extra pigs for a few months, I can practice 2 more hours a day and then I'll pick up the slack after that. So I practiced 6 hours a day for like 4 months or 5 months. And I ended up winning and got to go to nationals. And this is what, so this is what happened to Charlie. He came to Missoula. And this wasn't like what defined his life, but it was one of the things that motivates young people who are wanting to keep improving. I told you last week about Pablo Casals, and there's a connection to Zloty through his great series of music in St. Petersburg. Maybe that'll come up again. But Pablo Casals, great cellist. I didn't put the picture up yet, but so Grace, she's a treasure. She sent me a photo of her with Amit Peled, who plays with a string orchestra now and then. He's playing Pablo Casals' cello. So she has a picture. So it was her great-grandfather who brought Pablo Casals to Russia before anybody knew he was even important. And so this is what I'm talking about. And somebody said to him, you're 92 and you're still playing concerts? Do you still practice? And he said, of course. He said, I keep improving. So there's no end to how much you can improve. So that was Pablo Casals. Well, anyway, so Charlie came here and he played beautifully and he became a national finalist. And so I asked him, did you win the nationals? He said, no, I didn't. You know, he was at the time probably 15 and probably an 18-year-old one. Now, some of you know Marjorie Watley, right? Raise your hands. She's our wonderful, my colleague, my successor at the university. When I retired, she came in, and she has been here since, except she's not here today because she and her brother are playing. How many of you heard last year, maybe, with the symphony? She and her brother played that double concerto. Well, her brother, Bobby, won the national MTNA competition when he was in high school, and probably 16 or something. So you see what I'm saying? These things for certain people are great because they send you to your practice room to get better and give you the motivation to keep improving. There just is no end to that. So Marjorie and Bobby just played 2 concerts Monday night and last night in Macon, Georgia, their hometown. And Thursday night now they play in Huntsville, Alabama, where Marjorie used to be a tenured professor of piano there. And so they will play with the Huntsville Symphony Orchestra, the Mendelssohn Double Concerto that Mendelssohn wrote when he was 14. Who, if you haven't heard of Mendelssohn, we'll do another Molly class. That would be another interesting life. And musicians, as we see, are human beings, composers, pianists, all of us, you guys, we all. How many of you have had piano lessons? Oh, this is great. How many wish you'd had piano lessons? Okay, we'll sign you up. So there's a interesting research, just to digress yet a little bit more, but when Irvine, California, University of California, Irvine, decided to do a test and see if piano made a difference in kids. And so they took 3-year-olds, a group of 20, another group of 20, another group of 20. It had to be very scientific. This is several years ago, but the research is forever now because it's proven. And the kids that were 3 years old in this group, they had daycare, of course, whatever, preschool, and piano lessons for 6 weeks. And they tested them before and they tested them after their 6 weeks. It's just 6 weeks of piano lessons. Of course, they had to practice a little bit. And then this group just had daycare and a computer, and this group had just daycare. And the scores of the daycare kids just didn't change at all, and the computer kids went up like 1%. And what they tested them for, you've seen these puzzles where there's a little star place to put the star in the puzzle, and a little rectangle over here, and a little trapezoid over here. And they start getting to see how quickly they put these things together. So after the 6 weeks of piano lessons, the little 3-year-olds, they all became geniuses with the piano lessons. They went up consistently 35% in their scoring of how well they did on this spatial reasoning, it's called. Isn't that cool? It didn't work with the recorder, and it didn't work with the violin. And they think maybe it's because if you hear a note that's higher on the piano, you know where to go, but on the violin, what do you do with this thing? And which buttons do I push on the flute or the recorder? So the piano has a kind of a natural spatial reasoning effect. So they figured it out that the window of opportunity, I'm sorry if you didn't have piano lessons yet, because you could have been even smarter. And it has to happen between ages 3 and 11 to go into something like the mother tongue thing, something like that. So I was so excited about this, I brought the video to my piano class, and because I made a video of the NBC News special report on how music improves your abilities. And it also improves our heart and soul, right? So, but all of the other things too. And so I had this kid in the class, and we liked each other a lot, and he had a great sense of humor. And I said, how many of you had piano lessons before you were 11? You can raise your hands if you did. How many? Yeah, probably a lot of you. So Carl said, well, I had piano lessons before I was 11, but I'm a C- student. So I don't know if it worked. And I said, Carl, look at it this way. If you hadn't had the piano lessons, you'd be a D- student. And he laughed. He thought that was pretty funny. But anyway, music makes a difference. Okay, we know that. So now let's go on. There were a few questions, and Barbie and I talked about this a little bit, because you've seen a lot of shuffling around on 2 pianos up here, and we try to put the lids up, and sometimes we leave one lid down and the other one up. And a lot of you know, and I don't know if the person who asked these questions is here today, but one of the things that's come up as a question is, why is Steve playing with the lid up and no music, and Barbie's over here with the lid down and some music? And that's because I was playing a movement from the piano concerto that Charlie played for us. And a piano concerto, or any kind of concerto, is for a solo violinist with the orchestra, or a solo pianist with the orchestra, or even a singer singing arias from an opera with the orchestral accompaniment. So a concerto is for a solo instrument, or instrumentalist, or singer, and orchestra. And so we don't have an orchestra in the recital hall today. And so when we don't, then somebody plays the orchestra part. And it's called a reduction. It's reduced from all those instruments to a piano. So the melody's there, and the principal interesting lines are there. So then you see the one lid down, maybe up, but often down, and this lid up. And that's for the soloist. But when both lids are up and we're both using music, then that's, in this class, it's the Rachmaninoff suites for 2 pianos. So then the pianists are equal. There's no orchestra at all. It's just 2 pianos. And that's the way the piece was written. And we use the music so that we're just attuned to each other as well as to the notes. There are professional touring pianists who memorize the whole thing and they're done with the music, but we don't have time for that. Then another question that came up was kind of what's the process of memorizing? And I'm sure that's another 6-week class, how to memorize piano music. But for me, I can play by ear. I can't do, what was it he did? It wasn't the Wabash Cannonball. Great Balls of Fire. That, yes. And I mean, he can do that, and that's great, and he's done it since I was a kid. But in South Dakota, we barely had a record player, or we didn't get electricity on the farm till I was 3 years old, but I didn't know it. Anyway, so Charlie can do all these things, and I could do similarly play by ear when I was a kid. So memory for me was kind of through the ear. Other people don't memorize that way. They have to kind of go 4 measures by 4 measures. So it's an intricate process. But memory is like, for me, this person asked, well, what are you thinking about when you're playing from memory? Well, you shouldn't be thinking about anything except the music, because the other day when I was playing for something for you and all this equipment was failing, and I didn't fall apart, but I thought for a moment, maybe if I pushed that button, it would work. Dangerous thought. And then the notes sort of disappeared for about 1/10 of a second, and then you make something up. But you want to be in the music. You want to get to where we call it play by heart, right? Sometimes just can you play by heart, so you don't need the music, and it's because it's fused in a way to your soul and to your heart, and it gets deeper and deeper. And I'm going to use music today on a piece that is memorized, but I last played it probably 30 years ago, and I'm reviving it. And so you want to fall apart in front of a whole bunch of friends, and your friends, so I could, but I don't recommend it. And so you kind of go through, and you want, every time you go to the wrong note, you sort of learn something. So the next time you go, then you have fixed that little thing. And does that make a little bit of sense? So that was one of the questions. I wanted to just make sure I answered that. And then I want to know something from you before we kind of scroll through everything. What you guys thought of the performances this weekend, and we can't take all class for any of this. Here's some questions that came up. What's the difference between Rachmaninoff's Concerto No. 2 and Concerto No. 3? And it's probably, 10,000 hours for No. 2 and another 10,000 for No. 3. But No. 3 is just the next one that he wrote, and they're both so beautiful. Charlie says he loves No. 2 even more than No. 3. There are other people who love No. 3. So I just have a little bit of a recording of No. 3 with Horowitz playing. And I told you about this great teacher in Spokane, Washington. She was, and in 1942, she was the assistant to her Juilliard teacher in Santa Barbara, California. And this is Margaret Ott, I mentioned, who helped start the MTNA national competition. And she was in Santa Barbara, but the Hollywood Bowl, wherever that is, Pasadena, is it? I don't know. Is that right? I think. But anyway, wherever it was, Horowitz was playing. He was the famous person to play Rachmaninoff's Third Concerto. And Vladimir Horowitz, one of the great pianists of the 20th century. And if you didn't hear him in the 20th century, it's too late because he's no longer living. But you can listen to his recordings. And Rachmaninoff and he met in the basement of Steinway Hall in New York, and they went through this new concerto together, and Horowitz became the definitive performer for Rachmaninoff's choice. So in 1942, Horowitz was married to Wanda Toscanini, and Toscanini was this great conductor. You didn't mess with Toscanini, you did whatever he said. And he was conducting, and Horowitz was playing the Rachmaninoff Third, and Rachmaninoff was sitting across the aisle from Margaret Ott, and little piano teacher from Spokane, Washington. She said it's still the thrill of her life, the combination. She said the electricity in that room was just stunning. And before the piece even ended, the entire audience, including Rachmaninoff and his wife, were on their feet, just wild with enthusiasm. So the third and the second. Third, some say it's a little more technically challenging. The second, I decided something I think that I never really had until we did this class together, that there's these 3 years of depression, right, where the writer's block for Rachmaninoff. It just occurred to me finally, and other people seem to feel the same, maybe they thought of it first, that because of the depression, he didn't write almost anything. So those 3 years, nothing of any consequence, certainly. It was just totally nothing. But something was happening inside, right? Gestation, let's call it, or something. And so when this second concerto came out of him, it was one of the top 100 pieces forever, right? The whole planet Earth. It's considered that. Could it have been that good a piece if he'd been also writing string quartets and piano trios and things for the opera and all of that? It would have just been another piece on his music stand. And instead it was like there. It's kind of like his C-sharp minor prelude that he said it just occurred to him. He heard it and then he wrote it down. So I think the magnificence of that piece, I don't wish that depression on anybody, but I think the fallow period, let's call it. So something even greater came out of it. And then he was on his way. He wrote the 24 preludes in a period of just a few years. They say after he moved to the United States, you realize, everybody, that both Zloty and Rachmaninoff had to leave Russia for one reason. After the Tsar was assassinated in the family and all of that, and it became USSR, and lots of stuff still going on in the world, they confiscated all of the Rachmaninoff and Zloty properties, right? You'd be welcome to have this bedroom over here if you want to hang around or something, but they couldn't leave. So Rachmaninoff left first with his wife and the 2 daughters. And because Rachmaninoff had an invitation to do 9 concerts in Scandinavia over a period of months. So he could get a visa. You know, I have to go with my family. I can't be gone that long, and we have to leave. Never returned ever to Russia, ever. 1917 or 18 maybe, but 17 I think. And the Zloty family, similarly, you learned last week from Grace in part that Zloty's wife, Vera Tretyakov, we would say, but Tretyakova, I think the A is for a woman, but I'm not sure at the end of the name. They add something for feminine or masculine. But Vera was the daughter of this great magnate of art, the textile industry was their claim to fame. But Vera's father had married basically the equivalent of the railroad barons of this country that became quite wealthy, right? So they had a lot of money. So they also had a lot of things to flee because everything was confiscated except the Tretyakov Gallery, which didn't get to be claimed by the Tretyakov family. But some of the artworks, maybe the bronze hands even, were in the Tretyakov Gallery for a while that you saw last week. Anyway, let's continue. Memorized. How many years of playing the piano before being accepted into UM's School of Music? I guess that's an interesting question with no real answer, but pianists generally have several years of piano because you can't just come to a university and say, I'd like to be a piano major. Well, can we hear you play? Well, maybe you shouldn't hear me play yet. But some people come with less experience. And the University of Montana is not a conservatory, so we try to help people find their way. And if somebody comes with 5 years of piano instead of 10, then maybe they're going to be not a concert artist, but maybe they're going to be a great teacher in the schools. So we want everybody to get better, just like Pablo Casal's at age 92. But there are auditions, and there's all kinds of stuff that all schools share in common. I think maybe we'll just get back to stuff. So tell me, some of you, just 2 or 3 people, anybody want to share a Charlie experience? Yeah.
A life experience.
I think I heard a lot of people say, I have never heard anything like it, even all of us who've heard lots of concerts. Yeah.
I'm curious, the camera angles that the audience was able to enjoy, it brought that performance to a better level.
I think on the big screen, right?
yes.
Mhm.
Now, is that commonplace for pianists now? I mean, if you went to, New York Philharmonic and they had a pianist, would they be?
They could, I'm sure, but maybe not. Maybe.
Okay, so that's something that the Missoula Symphony arranged for that performance.
It became a capability, and COVID changed a lot of things. I don't know if we were doing it before COVID. Were we already having the screen? It seems like, we've moved on in some interesting ways.
It's a multiplier.
Yeah.
Yeah, it enhances, I think. Somebody told me they felt distracted by it and said, well, you don't have to look at the screen, you can just look at the pianist. But I find it very interesting, and especially when the angles change. Sometimes they're, oh yeah, yeah. He's got pretty fast fingers, yeah.
I think that visual also gave us the opportunity to see Charlie's reaction to what he was playing. That was fascinating.
It's in a way more intimate, isn't it? And even though it's big screen, it's still an intimate view, yeah.
A few years ago, there was a movie Shine about a piano player, I can't remember his name, who was mentally challenged but an incredible piano player.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to see him live, and it was the first time we ever saw somebody play the piano instead of perform piano. He was so into music and he was playing with the piano. And that's what I saw with Charlie. It was the first time since
Yeah. He's got a lot. He has this incredible ear, so his ear is always foreshadowing what he does. And I think that his heart connects to that very much. Yeah. Back here.
I got a chance to talk with Charlie during the intermission, and I told him I was just blown away by something that he did at the master class. When Marjorie's student played, I thought it was absolutely marvelous. And I had never heard of the piece before. And I thought, I heard him say as he was going up to the stage that he had never seen that one before. And I asked him, is that what you said? And he said, yes. I said, I hadn't even heard the composer. And I said, but not having seen that, you gave him such wonderful ideas about what to do with that piece. And I said, I was just so blown away by that.
Well, music is music, and so you hear and then you hear how it could be even better. And I think the fact that we who've taken that route to get better and better and better and keep improving our whole lives, you're always hearing what could be next. You hear. And I tell students, appreciate everything that you've accomplished, but aspire to something even more. And there's a little tightrope in there, so you don't want to get despondent that you're not playing as well as you'll play in 10 years or something, because you can't be suddenly 10 years older. Yeah, something, though, but he did have a remarkable ability to help on a brand new piece of a composer he'd never even heard of, let alone the piece. It's true. Anything else? Yeah?
Well, I told you how extraordinary I thought it was, and he said, well, ask him back.
Yeah. Actually, we're talking about having him back for a solo piano concert, so. And we think we'd have to do it in the Denison Theater, which would not be a bad thing, because 2,000 people just heard him and they loved him. So what's not to invite back? And it's not very far away. Oh, thank you. In case. Anybody else? Anybody want a mic? I could play it and you could sing. Okay, yeah.
I was struck in the second movement of the concerto that he could play soft notes that were also full and very clear.
Mm-hmm.
And it was logically you would think he had to have a heavier hammer strike to do that.
Yeah.
But he didn't. It was amazing.
You can project music outwardly, and you can also, what I sometimes call reverse projection, you pull the people in. And the softer, it's like whispering, and everybody, suddenly, what's so important that they're whispering? And you listen, yeah, something like that. Very much so, yeah. Yeah.
I was impressed with his physical involvement as well as his expression. But at a few points, he was even moved to be standing up. And a couple times, he had to wipe his brow.
Yeah, he worked up a sweat. Kind of let us know, okay, I got to do this now. Other? Well, let's move on, and you'll think of things, and maybe send, like some of you did, some questions too, and we won't necessarily answer everything. Maybe there aren't answers, but let's move through here a bit. And then Barbie's going to come, and we're going to play a little bit for you at the end, but I wanted you to hear some of Alexander's playing, and then some of Maria, his daughter-in-law's playing. She was his student. And this is something you can, I just found this for fun. This is... oh well, I'm learning my own new system. But Charlie, you can find him online. Oh here, no, that's Galel. So I'm just going to move on. I found him playing the Blue Danube Waltz, and you just look for you'll get the playlist, and then you can listen. Okay, so still learning. Here we go. I can do it this way though. So those were some questions. So I told you about our concertos and our two piano suites, and we're going to have some music, so let's just get to it. Alexander Zalotti, we were talking about last week, and with Grace, about her great-grandfather. And I started to play for you something that I would love for you to hear. So oh, here it is. Here's the Blue Danube. Let me play a little bit of it. I won't play it all because it's just... Here we go. Now, this was on a recital in New England Conservatory. Is that loud enough? Oh, look. This is interesting. Why isn't it showing that screen now? I put a full screen, but it's stuck. I want this screen to go away for the second. Oh. See what I mean? I said to you guys, you learn more from your failures than you do from your successes, so that's why I'm learning so much all the time. Wow, interesting. Okay. There. So the word that comes to mind for me is genuine. So you can listen, I hope, are you using the PowerPoint things? Can you find them? I hope. Not yet, maybe. Well, figure it out, talk to Karen and Terry here if you need, and get yourself into that. We should be back here. So I think, I hope I can get back to that other screen as needed. So I want to get to now, this is going to be Zalotti playing. And that's the part I can't see this up here right now. I don't know if you're looking at it, but I'm going to just do it this way. Here we go. Maybe that'll get me there. And then I want the playlist for week 3. Okay, I'm going to move on to something that I mentioned later. This is the Horowitz. This is the recording of Horowitz playing the Rachmaninoff Third. And it was live, and it was with Zubin Mehta in the New York Philharmonic. He was 75 years old, my age, and playing magnificently. Now, at the point Rachmaninoff was writing the Third Concerto, and then later the Paganini variations from the 1930s, he was writing for himself in a way to have something else to play with orchestra. It's not often that a composer is a fantastic pianist, and he was sort of a fantastic pianist before he was an outstanding composer. And I've been thinking about this, that he somehow couldn't write other than how he grew up. Stravinsky and Rachmaninoff were compatriots in a way, and Stravinsky about 8 years younger than Rachmaninoff. They really didn't know each other until later in life in California they met. But Stravinsky went a very different way. He was a modernist. Everything, and I have some recordings, and you'll get to kind of compare a little bit in your homework. But Stravinsky wasn't a very great pianist. You see what I'm kind of saying? And so he didn't have that as a limitation for how his fingers wanted to feel the music. He was like a mind, and he was studying law, and he was going to do other things. And here's where the Zalotti connection comes in. So Alexander Zalotti became not just a great teacher and all of that, but he also started a concert series in St. Petersburg after he'd taught and after he did the world premiere of the Second Concerto. And, okay. And so when Zalotti started this concert series, I told you he brought Pablo Casals to St. Petersburg, and that sort of spurred his career on. And Stravinsky was just this student at the St. Petersburg, whatever, at the university. And studying music, though, he was interested, and he was interested in theory, and he'd been dabbling as a kid a little bit with composition. He had some piano lessons. I don't know if it was before he was age 11, but this is Stravinsky, and so he could just explore writing. What happened is Diaghilev is an impresario of ballet. The Ballet Russe was in Paris, and the Ballet Russe was very popular, and it was like the big deal in Paris to go to the ballet. And so Diaghilev came back to Zoloty, and he said, I need somebody to write a Russian ballet, something that's never been written before. And Zoloty had Stravinsky, as a young man, had written a little orchestral piece about 6 or 8 minutes long, and it was going to be in a concert. And he said, well, why don't you come to the concert? This is the guy from Paris, but a Russian guy, Diaghilev, and why don't you come and hear this young man and an interesting piece? And so that made Stravinsky famous. Rite of Spring, Petrushka, Firebird, all of those pieces came out of this not quite chance meeting, but Zoloty was like this promoter of other people. And something else interesting to think about is that while Zoloty was touring himself as a student of Liszt, I know there's so many pieces to connect together here, but Franz Liszt, the great pianist in Europe, a great teacher, and after Zoloty finished studying with Tchaikovsky in Moscow and his piano lessons, and he got the gold medal, and then he was sent to study with Liszt. And Liszt made something of Zoloty's career, but then when Zoloty was touring in the 1890s, he started playing Rachmaninoff's C-sharp minor prelude on every concert as an encore, in all over Germany and Scandinavia and Europe. Well, it was just a pretty piece, and everybody said, and I told you this one day, everybody said, who wrote that? And so he said, well, it's my cousin. He's, a developing pianist and composer. And so by the time Rachmaninoff needed to leave Russia, you could say, he was already a world-class pianist, and before that, between 1902, when he wrote the second piano concerto in 1901, he started touring with it, and everybody already knew him because of his C-sharp minor prelude, which he wasn't so excited to play anymore eventually. Let's see if I can get to Maria now. I wanted you to hear just some of the influences also on, let's just see if I can scroll through this a little bit. This is sounds that Rachmaninoff had in his ears. This is Orthodox chant. I have to try to learn how to do this. So Rachmaninoff was not a religious man, but he had a time where his grandmother made sure he went to the Russian Orthodox Church. So he heard the bells, and he heard the, let's get to the other, and he heard the chant. And that isn't exactly a chant because it's a song, a piece for 4 male singers. Here are the bells of Red Square. Let's see. So when you hear, and Charlie mentioned it, both at the pre-concert talk and when you hear this, so he calls those bells, and they are. Those are a huge influence in Rachmaninoff. And I don't know yet, but is it okay if I leave the microphone on while I'm playing the piano? It works? It's all right? Or not? It's okay? So then when you have, sort of that stuff, you hear bells as well in that. And you have the end. In the very end, you hear whatever next chord. I don't have them in front of me right now, but then you hear at the end. So I've been thinking about this since our last class. So there are 3 pieces or 3 places in pieces where he does this exact same thing, where he uses the bell sounds. And at the end of the second movement, where you get da-da, bell type sounds, just ringing, triumphant sounds, if you will. And what in my mind, I wanted to have the score already on the screen for you today. It's not working quite, but there's a harmony here that some people have been telling me that they just get tears in their eyes when they hear this music. It just does something to our hearts. And so there's this harmony, and then you get this. And it goes by and you sort of don't even know it's happening to you. But this one chord, you're in the key of E major. Oops, sorry. And you're moving through beautiful harmonies. Rachmaninoff understood harmony. He studied harmony with Tchaikovsky, and so he got the goods. And so you get to this one chord where you go. Right there, all those notes have nothing to do with E major. Every note is wrong. Does that make sense? And here's E major. And so I did a talk about this once at church where dissonance is part of life. And dissonance in music is wrong notes going to right notes, like arguments that get resolved or unhappy experience that we get past it or understand something better. And so you get... And so all these wrong notes go to the right notes. And that voicing, it's like when you go to the grocery store and you don't just buy ice cream, you buy the triple slow churned, slow churned, triple fudge. This is like triple fudge. And so it's happening inside the music, and you're going along and you think, my gosh, something's just making my heart weep, kind of. And so you get the cadenza in the first movement, you get... And right there, he could have written, but instead he writes. Does that feel different? Even if you don't know music theory. And he understood harmony, so this, let's see, there. And then he also understood so that quality there, instead of by comparison, and I used to listen to Leonard Bernstein doing these young people's concerts on television when I was a kid. And I think he'd say, now, doesn't that sound more beautiful? And I'd say, and maybe it was the little 3-inch speaker in our television, maybe it wasn't just me, but I thought, I don't really hear a difference. So it's okay if you don't. But this is almost happy by comparison to this triple fudge. And then you don't expect this. So there are so many unexpected harmonies. So I guess today's talk was going to be something about a romantic ideal or pervasive thought. Maybe it wasn't even until after the fact that they said it's all about yearning. If you yearn for something, you just, maybe you can't quite have it, or you have to aspire, or you have to work to achieve it, maybe. But yearning is a real word, and it's a real aspect of life. And so the way romantic composers made yearning happen in music was they avoided the ordinary. They avoided the home key. So that the piece, the second concerto you just heard Charlie play so beautifully, starts with this. Now, all those harmonies are changing, but they all have in common this one bell note. And so this was a thing. And the notes are going inside. And so you're hearing, and this is different, similar but edgier, and this is wanting even more, and this is also possible. So he had a C hidden in every one of those chords, but they sounded like F minor chords, which has something to do with C minor, but it isn't C minor. So you're avoiding the home key. You're keeping everybody in suspense. They don't know it, but you just think, what's coming next? I don't know what's coming, but it's definitely coming. And finally, here comes C minor. Then you get your Orthodox chant. So you've had bells and you've had chant, but it's not about that. It's just using those qualities, perhaps. Does that make some sense? So it makes us feel that yearning. And so when we get, let's see. And so you get these notes and these. Those are all part of the harmony. But that isn't. It's sort of a neighboring note that has to get back home somehow. So. reason that whole theme, the second theme, is so beautiful in your heart is that you're in C minor. The chant and the Vogelboat song and all the Russian quality of the kind of noble but also primitive in a way. And then you get to the beautiful sweetness of E flat major. And then the cello does this, while the pianist does this. So there's counterpoint, and there's all kinds. Rachmaninoff was a genius of harmony, a genius of counterpoint, a genius of musical form, melody, just melodies that went on forever. When you hear this, I'm glad to do this, but that isn't working quite yet. So. And there's that triple fudge chord. You don't know this, but so far it's harmonized in a whole new way from what the orchestra did earlier on in the piece. Where, wait. And they keep going. Right there, and right here, the orchestra ends. And then the piano, Charlie or I, picks up from there, but when the pianist does it later in this other version, fudge, and then it just keeps going on forever. And it's when I learned it, I thought, how can that keep going like that? It's just too beautiful. So this is why you love it. This is why it's one of the top 100 pieces ever. And maybe it's because he had 3 years where he couldn't write anything that it finally it was mulling around inside of him. It's amazing stuff. Barbie's going to come soon if she isn't. Oh, thank you. I just want to show you this, because these aren't homeworks, but these are opportunities for you at home. So do try to listen to Maria, if I can find her now. What I have to get to is last week's, there it is. Now it's behaving. So here we are. This is Maria playing. And she gave me this piece, and you saw last week, and it's on the PowerPoint with her little stamp. And this was her father-in-law who improved Liadov's prelude by just keeping the best notes. And that's Alexander, and that's Franz Liszt. So all of this knits together. And that's Maria. And that's the piano that she's playing on. There's the music. She had many stories, and you'll look on your PowerPoint.
He had asked me, did he not know the piece?
Oh, that's,
As I made no reply, he repeated the question,
I can find
raising
that.
his voice.
that's the
I then
book.
told him the name
Any
of
of
the
you
piece
got to hear
in
the
a
book
subdued.
yet? It's a book, an
I-
audio book.
But what else? He said.
There, My Memories of Liszt, and that's by Alexander Zoloty, studying with Liszt. And she told me of a story where and that's the piece I couldn't get up for you today, but maybe next week or just on your own. It's the benediction of Liszt. And what happened is that Zoloty had this big talent for improving other people's music. If that makes sense, he could hear how Liadov's piece could sound even better. And so he made this version of it, a revision, if you will. It's not just a transcription, it's revised, it's different. So he was brave enough one day to talk to his maestro Liszt, and he said, I love your benediction, which you can hear on a piano roll, and you can hear it on a sort of a digitalized version, which is excellent. And those are on your homework. And so he said to Liszt, I think your piece could sound even better if you did this and this and this. And Liszt studied the score, and this is Maria telling me, but it's also in the book. And he is looking, Mr. Liszt, at his own score with the suggestions of Alexander Zoloty, and he says, this is wonderful. It's exactly what I would have done if I had revised it myself. It's great. And he said, from now on, you may do anything you wish to my music with my music, and you may sign my name. But you may not sign my checks. That was the story. And it was just a fun story. And the other thing Maria told me about was when they left the country, and Grace was alluding to it last week and explaining a little bit more. And she wants to come again next week after her trip. But she told about, and Maria told me about, the night that they left Russia. And it was only Oksana. There were 6 children, but only Oksana was of the age to go with Mama and Papa. on this sleigh ride, but it wasn't a sleigh ride. It was getting from St. Petersburg. 40 miles is how far it was, and they had to wait for the Baltic Sea shoreline, you might say, to freeze, because if you're leaving Russia, you can't take the roads, right? You can't take the highway. They'll stop you at the border and say, no, go back, or come with us, that kind of thing. And so they had to go on the sea and avoid. And then Vera writes, and you can read it, it's in last week's PowerPoint, and she's writing about that harrowing journey of 40 miles in the middle of the night. And of course, night is in December forever up there in the north country, almost forever. And so she said the harrowing part was the searchlights. And they're like, I looked on the internet, and you can see, if I get lucky, I'll show you the path. That much is worth seeing. So let's go quickly through. That's Grace, you met last week, and you'll see again her greenhouse. She sent me this picture since last week. There she is with Zalotti in the right over there, and that's her teacher and her father-in-law. And here they are in Switzerland at the Rachmaninoff estate. There's Mr. Rachmaninoff, and there's Maria, and that's Mrs. Rachmaninoff. And so I thought that's the coolest picture. So she sent that to me. But the leaving of the journey on that nighttime travel, come on. You'll look at these at home. There. Now, they only had to go from here to here. Oops, don't keep going. Why did that just go on so? There's so many things. See you next week. That's a good time for me to play the Rachmaninoff that I'm going to play for you, and then Barbie will join me. Just let me get there. I want you to see this. This next. So here's the searchlights, and this is like 8 miles. And so they're scouring, for the landscape in the middle of the night to see if they see any movement whatsoever. And here's St. Petersburg, and they had to get their horse and their little carriage and get here. And already in 1919, it had been back and forth, Finland or Russia. And Finland was part of the Russian Empire for centuries. And they wanted to be independent. You know something of this in modern times. And so Russia got it back, and it is still finally an agreement on the border. But just 40 miles from St. Petersburg, it doesn't seem like very far unless you might get caught going there. And this was Terijoki or something in Finnish. And so it was still a Finnish settlement. And in 1919, they had not yet expelled all the Finns and sent them back to Helsinki. Can you imagine? And so this is real stuff. And there they made it. But you'll look at that at home, and so it's a real trip. What I'm going to play for you on my own is a D major prelude. So at the time, 1901 was the second concerto, but he was starting to concertize a lot, Rachmaninoff was, because he had a family to support. And that's going to stay here. And he... Here we go. One page turn. So he needed some repertoire because he wasn't going to play everybody else's music and so he wrote 24 preludes over time. And in 1901 to 03, he wrote several of these preludes, and this is from that set. I think I'll shut off the speaker just in case. And this is Perfect Arch. You'll hear yearning. You'll hear something like a familiar melody, verse 1, verse 2, verse 3, verse 4. And every time you hear that melody, something else that's different. So the melodies... And then when it comes back... It's like a violinist walked into the room and just started, I could add this. In choirs, we call it the descant or the obbligato sometimes. So you'll hear that, and then you'll hear the climactic thing. Last week we talked about Rachmaninoff's every piece has a point, or every sonata has a movement in a place he considered it his point, that he wanted to focus all the energy toward that. And it may subside, it may be quiet, whatever, but there's a point. So you'll feel those things, and you'll feel the yearning. And then Barbie will come out and we'll play for you one of the movements from a 2-piano suite. She is piano 1, so she'll be on this. I'm piano 2, so I will be on the other instrument. Okay. touch right there. So you get. And it's called a half diminished chord. And there are times when I feel more than half diminished, but or anybody, but it's just the greatest sound, and he loved that. He uses it over and over again. And it just kind of takes you heavenward or something and then lets you back down. You're not going to listen for that harmony per se in music, but you're going to feel it somehow. Yeah. So, Barbie. Yeah, come, please. So this is the waltz from the two piano suite. Turn this back on. This is the waltz from the two piano suite, Opus 17. And so when I invented this course in my mind, it was centered around Opus 17, Opus 18, Opus 19. Opus 18 is the heart of it, that's second concerto. And it was so nice that Charlie was coming to play, so I said, can we back up 2 weeks so that we can have a little advance before Charlie comes? And then we've been playing a little bit, was it last week we played some of the romance? And that's the third movement where right, we're both doing that by heart. So, and so this is the second movement of 4 movements, and next week Chris and Barbie are going to bring a piece from the first suite, which sort of inspired this suite. So you see composers get to sort of be inspired by their own work and come to a place where they have a new idea or a way to use an old idea in a new way. So this is a waltz, and lovely, and for 2 pianos, and so we both have our lids up and we're both using music. I'll shut the microphone off here. Well, together we made it to 1028. So, yeah, Barbie's such a great colleague and such a wonderful friend and beautiful pianist, and I'm just so happy always to get a chance to play with her.
Well, it's such a privilege for me to participate in this wonderful Molly class and with the great artist Steve.
Oh, yeah. I don't even know where our microphone, oh, I know. I was going to give her the microphone, but that disappeared too. So you guys are wonderful, and we'll meet again next week. Chris will be here, and Marjorie will be, I think, gone again. There's Parents' Day at her daughter's college, one of them. So she'll be back in 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks, we have a bunch of little previews of pianissimo pieces that are happening that weekend, 2 weeks from now, on Friday and Saturday. So 2 weeks from Friday and Saturday, and you're all welcome to that. The flowers will probably be frozen by then. So are there any questions just before we stop? Yeah.
What is Grace's music background? Is she a
Grace has almost no music background. It's not everybody in every family, of course, and I was the only one in our family who pursued it. My older brother explains to me that he had about 3 piano lessons, and he was just enough older, probably 7, and he went to Mom and said, "Mom, this is going nowhere. Save your money." And my younger brother used to watch cartoons, and then Mom would say, "Your practice time has started," and he'd crawl on his shoulders, not wanting to miss a single thing of the cartoon. And anyway, things like that. So I was the one, and you know, I was talking about yearning. My family was always yearning that I would practice in the barn or someplace else so they could watch their television shows. Anyway, here's Karen with some thoughts. Yeah, or...
Oh, no, I was just bringing the mic down so
Oh, yeah, okay.
if people had questions, we'd be able to hear them.
Yeah.
Forgive me if this is a really naive question, but the preludes, were they preludes to something?
You know, that's isn't it a great question? Because for Bach, you know, they became the preludes and fugues, right, for example. And that's actually going to be on your homework to hear some from the listening sheet, a Bach prelude from a prelude and fugue. And gradually they became a work all unto themselves. Yeah, and just it became a title in a way. And this we haven't talked about yet, but these are called character pieces. Shorter works, not a whole symphony. And a single piano piece. Chopin wrote 24 preludes in 24 major and minor keys. Bach wrote his preludes, they were in 24 major and minor keys, but they included the fugues. So it's a good question. But later in Rachmaninoff, there were just preludes, and one for every key, major and minor. Okay, anything else?
Anybody else have a question?
You're all looking at your watches. Yeah.
Steve, I saw you turn your page, but it didn't turn.
Oh.
And you had to get it again.
Maybe.
How does that put you behind, or does that scare you?
No, you just have to leave out something for a moment. Or
Is
something.
that right?
Yeah.
Oh, who knew? Yeah.
I don't know, you call somebody in, "Hey, would you come up and play those notes, please?" There are a piece by Charles Ives where the page turner throws in some notes. I love that. That's a great piece. Yeah. Well, it's fun to get together with you guys. And next week, again, Chris will be here with some other pieces, and we'll keep getting better at how I thought I had this all rehearsed last night. I'm not mad about it, it's just kind of weird, you know, you have it all planned out and then suddenly there's 7 little screens looking at you. Anyway, but these gals have been great to help me, and so we're getting there. Okay, so you guys have a great, stick around if you wish.